It's to question these things.
Here we are. We are live and in person with a guest tonight
Woo!
for the Three Blind Vikes. We have our usual suspects, me, JB, Cora, and Terry, our married couple of the blinds, and tonight's special guest host. He's a writer and editor for Vikings Territory, the Vikes Now podcast, and he does the annual Vikings Twitter Awards, which we need to get a name for, Dustin. Welcome in, Dustin Baker. We are thrilled to have you with us tonight. Thank you for your time.
You picked a wonderful day to schedule this with me on it because of today. When you're writing about the Vikings, today is like probably the busiest or second busiest day of the year because of all the roster movement. And so, yeah, all of the players that were jettisoned, like 42% of the team left. And then, we're only 12 days away from the regular season. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Dustin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Carnage Day for the league. And, it's a rough day. And there were some cuts today that were made. And I felt a little bad about, but we're going to get into that right away because this is going to be basically tonight, aside from our regular segments, we're going to talk about rosters. We're just going to talk about the roster moves that were made, guys that maybe made the team and we're not sure belong there, and guys who I thought had a really strong chance of making the team and aren't there anymore. Let's talk about the players that aren't there that you feel really earned their spot. Dustin, as the guest, I want to hear from you first on this one. Who do you think really a surprise cut to you?
So, because I am so ingrained in this every single day, there was nothing ginormous. I've seen more surprising years, but that doesn't mean, Joe Everyman, who checks on the Vikings once a week and watches the games, wouldn't be surprised by a lot. So for me, there were two items that stood out. It was Kene and Nwangwu not being a part of the team. I think every credible voice, Vikings theme voice, had him being the RB3, especially after they released all the other running backs. There's only two on the team right now. So in Nwangwu, you lose all of that speed. He was the fastest guy on the team. They evidently don't like him for the new kickoff rule. That doesn't necessarily fancy straight line speed like Nwangwu has. So right away when Nwangwu was dropped, that was the most surprising one at the moment and of the day for me. I was surprised that Jalen Redmond made the team. He was one of those guys from the XFL that got a trial with the Vikings. And usually when you see those, you're like, oh, that'll be fun. He'll be cut in late August. And he actually made it. So I don't know if he'll get extensive playing time. And in fact, if the Vikings have to sign another running back, he might be like the first guy that's like cut or dropped to the practice squad. But I did not have him on my 53-man roster. And then finally, when I say Joe Everman, who watches the Vikings, or Joe Everman's wife, the high-profile guys like Robert Tonyan, Duke Shelley, them not making the roster, they folks might have seen that like May or June blurb and been like, oh, sweet, we got Robert Tonyan. No, he didn't play very much this summer and didn't make the cut. So those high-profile guys that have been ingrained at us over the years, they didn't make it. And then finally, the slow march to Louis Scene's exit. It's a real Vikings thing that guy looked fantastic for the first time ever a week and a half ago. And we had to see that and get all excited. And then now he's going to go play for somebody else and try to reclaim his career. So those are my surprises in a nutshell, headlined by Nwangwu.
Cora and Dan, how about you? What do you think?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yep. Yeah. that was kind of my exact thoughts was.
Yeah. I mean, Nwangwu, I was surprised they took him because, I mean, he's good. I mean, as a backup, he's been very, helpful. He's not made a lot of fumbles. He's not bad. So I was surprised that he was cut. And then I was surprised that Scene was cut only because of the fact he was a first-round draft pick. But, I mean, his performances were obviously not great. I mean, I think people are saying that he's the worst first-round draft pick, which, definitely up there, but not the worst. Yeah, and so it's just kind of like, I don't know. I kind of expected him to hold on, but I'm wondering if he'll make the practice squad or if they're hoping that he'll stay for the practice squad because who was it? There was a player that they cut back when Zim was on defense. I can't even think of his name. It's a very obscure name, but they cut him and they signed him to the practice squad, but they signed him at like a really high salary on the practice squad. So he stayed with the Vikings and didn't go anywhere else. Oh, what's his name?
It's going to bug her now.
It's going to bug her. I will look him up, but I wonder if they're going to do something like that with either Kene or Scene because he's a first round draft pick. Like, I hate that they let that go, but.
So Scene goes through the waiver process now, which means 31 teams can claim him, like starting at the worst teams last year. I think he'll get claimed. There'll be some general manager that remembers his tape from Georgia and thinks that they can fix him. I think Scene's biggest problem, in addition to his broken leg almost 2 years ago, is the team doesn't need him. Like, they flat out don't need another safety. And so it's like, are you really going to bench Harrison Smith and put Lewis Scene in? No. Are you going to bench Metellus and Bynum? No. And so even if he was just this badass all summer that was doing the shit that he did against Cleveland training camp, where would you play him? Like, you wouldn't. You'd be stashing him with the expectation that Harrison Smith will eventually retire. But that was always the biggest head scratcher for me, was where does he fit on the team? And you're correct that it's a sad ending. The guy only played 10 defensive plays as a Viking. And the only other worst draft pick would be Demetrius Underwood, because he went AWOL before he even played 10 defensive snaps. So.
We didn't even step on the field.
I think my biggest surprise, and this might just be my personal preference, I don't like only having 2 running backs.
Mm-hmm.
I would have rather of us kept Darnold and Mullins and then kept one of the other running backs.
Wait, what?
Because we kept
for the roster
quarterbacks.
spot. Mm-hmm.
Quarterbacks.
Yeah, we kept 3 quarterbacks, and I would have rather us kept 3 running backs versus 2.
Gotcha.
I think they will sign one very soon. I don't think they're going to try to sell CJ Ham to us as the third running back. I guess there's a world where that could happen, but there are a lot of unemployed running backs as of right now, or at least ones that are hitting the waiver wire. Donta Foreman stood off the page in Cleveland. Kwesi has the ties to Cleveland, so he'll know the true scouting report on him. But it would be really weird for a team that had 6 running backs on Saturday, only has 2 now, to say, no, this is fine. I mean, last year they had injuries to every single one of their running backs.
Yep.
And so I think that we will see at least one more. It's just weird that Mo Ibrahim or McBride, they didn't even go to the practice squad. Like, so They are truly down to nubbins for halfbacks, just 2 of them. And one of the most important parts about this season is improving the ground game. Otherwise, we're going to do the same thing over and over and over again, where you have this rushing attack that ranks near the bottom of the league, not absolutely atrocious, but like 26th, 25th or so. If you can't run the football, it doesn't matter how well you pass it, because teams will kind of pigeonhole you into that one dimension.
Yeah, so, as much as I like Aaron Jones, I mean, I don't trust his health all that much.
That's the big knock on him.
Yeah, I had the thought, we kept CJ Ham at fullback. Did we keep him to trade him?
No.
Ham? No.
Don't you dare say that.
I don't think anybody wants him.
It was a thought.
Shame on those thoughts.
Nobody uses fullbacks besides us and the 49ers. So I doubt anybody else.
Yeah, and he's a dying breed in the NFL. Much like kick returners now. Can you imagine Devin Hester playing in this day and age as a kick returner? He'd never see the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. He'd have to buy a ticket to get in, because they are taking the kicking game out of this and as much as possible. Every year they're tweaking this game. They might as well just give everybody a ball at the 25-yard line and start from scrimmage there.
Well, that's pretty much what we had last year. Yeah. That's why Nwangu felt like a roster cut last year, and they kept him. I think the medical science must say that blah, blah, blah percentages of our injuries in this sport come from the collision of dudes running full speed from the other side of the field. That's the only thing I could think of for them to water it down this much. And if it protects players, I guess I'm all for it. That's kind of how I feel. I used to love ginormous hits, like when I was a teenager in college.
Sure.
Yeah, but those are a dying breed.
See?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I just
the argument of like, okay, are we just going to get rid of crossing routes then?
Yeah, we don't know where the slippery slope stops.
I would say like crossing routes, if you isolated crossing routes, that's the single highest injury rate.
Yeah, and
compared to the entire play of a kickoff.
Yeah, and I just thought about the hip drop tackle thing. I hadn't thought about that in quite some time. I wonder how strictly that'll be enforced.
That's going to be a tough one. Officials are going to miss that call.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to miss the call.
Or they're going to call it and it's not called, and then it's just going to make it even more muddy.
It's going to become like the catch rule, and it's just going to blow all our minds, and that's not good.
Well, there was also, do you remember right towards the end of Adrian Peterson's Vikings heyday, they had the rule that said that players couldn't like duck their heads into other players, and then that was never enforced.
Yeah, you could not lead with your head.
Yeah, it was like really, and then nothing ever came of that. I still think it's a rule on the books.
Yeah,
probably.
It's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hidden rule that they never use, but they're trying. I get the player health issue. I get that this game now, quite honestly, these players are commodities now. The amount of money invested in talent is at a point where they're trying to protect that talent as much as possible. Back in the day, back before money was so big in football, they did everything. You saw, guys were out there playing on broken legs. If you read about the stories about Jerry Kramer, he had a 4-inch piece of wood in his belly and he played with that. It's just like crazy stuff that they were playing for the love of the game, and now it's just it's the money aspect, I think, that's watering down the game.
You got to protect your investments.
It's Absolutely. The reason why they changed the All-Star game.
Yeah, just got rid of it basically.
Yeah,
it's a flag football game.
Yeah.
and I guess that's fun for people who just want to get some kind of football. It's better than nothing, and it's definitely better than what we were watching in those Pro Bowls.
Oh my gosh, that was awful.
I'd rather see like an all-star conference where they end up like you get a meet and greet with these all-star players. They do the skills competitions and all this, but I bet fans would enjoy a meet and greet more than they would a flag football game.
I'm sure.
Other than like getting more money, is there any benefit to winning the Pro Bowl?
No.
Because in the All-Star game for the MLB, you get to pick if you're home team or away
team. Not a pick, no. If you win the All-Star game,
you're
so like
there, okay.
In the All-Star game, you have the American League and the National League. Whichever team wins the All-Star game from the Americans or National League, that league is the home team for the World Series.
I thought they did away with that, but I'll have to look it up.
I thought that was the way it was still being done.
But we have digressed now off the path.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Welcome to our podcast.
That's what happens, right? We are literally running blind with what we talk about. The guy I thought was going to make this team and didn't was Bo Richter.
Yeah.
I really thought, wow, he had a heck of a preseason. He had the guy's motor is just off the charts. I guess they just didn't have room for him, is the best I could think of. But then you get a guy like Levi Drake Rodriguez, who again he really opened some eyes to a point where we let a number 5 or 5th rounder go.
Yeah.
In favor of putting him on the roster as a 7th rounder. So that was kind of a surprise add to the roster, Rodriguez, but not really, not the way he played in the preseason.
So are we just not picking great picks, or are we picking, are our coaches good at developing underrealized talent?
Well, in the 2022 draft, that was not a good introduction for Kwesi. That it can now be said safely with Scene and Booth. But for example, the 2023 draft, that really isn't problematic. 5th rounders get cut. It happens. It's not like a indictment of the general manager. It happens all over the league. Dwayne McBride, 7th rounder. Some of those late round picks are really lottery tickets. And then when you find dudes you like the next year, kind of like Dwight McLaughlin, he stole somebody's roster spot. You kind of say, what have you done for me lately? So beyond the shadow of a doubt, the 2022 draft class, the first 2 picks are failures, probably with Asamoah too. I don't know how much he's going to play. But, with the Addison pick, and then we hope McCarthy is the real deal. I wouldn't say that the last 2 drafts have been drafted poorly. It's just that late rounders don't necessarily have staying power on the roster. They're not guaranteed to stick.
Why didn't somebody tell that to Rick Spielman, who used to like to accumulate the back end picks the rounds where nobody's even watching. They're just going to look in the paper the next day to see who we took. Because that was Rick's MO. He would just backload those draft picks, and everybody, oh, Spielman got 12 picks. Sure he did. And 8 of them were in the 5th round or later.
Yeah, that was so, I mean, I give him kudos for trying something different. What was that, 2019, I think? Something like that? 2018, where he had all those 7th rounders. But I kid you not, when you go back and you look at round 6 and 7, and even round 5, those are usually just nothing burger picks across the league. We pound the table for Tom Brady in the 6th round, and that makes casual fans think, hey, we're going to find our guy. That hardly ever happens. When Diggs broke out round 5, that was kind of a one of a kind deal. But so I never understood the, hey, let's get a bunch of 7th rounders strategy. They're really straight up lottery tickets, and our job is to get excited about them during the summer and everything, because that's what we do as fans, but it's just so rare that they pan out.
I've never been a fan. I'd rather have 5 total picks and have them all come in the first 3 or 4 rounds.
Oh, yeah.
But there are people that are out there like, oh, see that? We got 8 picks in this draft, or 9 picks, and you guys only had 5. Yeah, but like you got half of your picks are throwaway picks.
The more you play the lottery, the higher chance you win.
Well, consider this. Now we've got a track record of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. The after party of undrafted free agency is almost just as sweet as the draft, especially if you set aside the 1st round and then you take day 2 and day 3. I'm telling you, undrafted free agency with Ivan Pace and then the 2 or 3 guys that made the squad, that's becoming like an annual Vikings tradition, where I think I figured out the hack is they send more guaranteed money offers towards these guys that they like, and that brings in the Ivan Paces, the Dwight McLaughlin. But yeah, if McLaughlin ends up getting a lot of playing time this year or next year, one of our things we're gonna have to do every weekend, draft weekend, is say like, all right, baby, draft's over, let's start the real party. Yeah, right. Who's the UDFAs?
I'm looking at our wide receiver depth now. We know who our 1 and 2 are. What do we think Naylor is the number 3, or does Tristan Jackson slide in there, or do they maybe split that spot for this season? Because Jackson was fantastic in the preseason, but Naylor also was fantastic. I mean, the Vikings have had that issue with the number 3 spot for a while. Do we think we finally solidified it with this preseason, or is it maybe a little too early to tell yet until we play some real games?
If that one is to me, the only knock on Jalen Naylor is the injuries. I've said on my show a few times now, he had so many various things wrong last year, concussion. I just stopped researching what was wrong with him. By like week 7, I was like, he's not going to play, so I don't care anymore what's wrong with him. And I figured that his stock was tremendously low heading into this offseason because the guy is never healthy. And that was the rub on him at Michigan State. He's never healthy. So this summer, he did his usual thing where he looks fantastic at minicamp and training camp. It seems like it has a little bit more like credence this year, long lasting. It makes sense that they always loved him because I don't know if you guys, how often you do your show, but on my show, I'd have guests come on almost daily and they'd say, sign Hunter Renfrow, sign Michael Thomas, all of those straggler free agents from the last couple months, and the Vikings just refused to do it. So I have faith that the Naylor experiment can work. With Tristan Jackson, I'm very glad he made this roster. That guy's been a part of the Vikings now. This is his 4th season, if you can believe that or not. Mostly on the practice squad, but he's kind of like James Lynch. He's just been around forever, but we never really use him. I like him. I always caveat the preseason because they are playing bench guys. You might remember last year, T.Y. McGill, the defensive tackle, looked like an utter badass, and then he was just unceremoniously cut. 2-3 years ago, Albert Wilson caught 2 touchdowns against the Raiders in a preseason. He was cut 3 days later. So there's no exact science in preseason that said it's going to translate to the regular season. But Tristan did make the active roster, and that means something. Brandon Powell, we saw against the Falcons last year how sweet he can be at times. I wouldn't be utterly shocked if the Vikings nudged around at Noah Brown or somebody that was released today. But the way that they love Naylor, I think we're hoping that this is the year that Naylor stays healthy, and we're hoping he can be more dynamic than KJ Osborne, who was always pretty good, but never like a game breaker.
Yeah. Honestly, I hope Naylor stays healthy, but if he doesn't, I don't think we're that bad off behind him.
No. Mm-mm.
I think there's a big drop off after obviously Justin Jefferson and then Addison. Yeah. And I definitely think there's a drop off, but the bottom four, I don't think there's much of a drop off between them.
No, they're very close. I think you can interchange them and we'll be just fine.
It kind of depends on how Sam Darnold cooks as well, because like if this was Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, we really wouldn't care who the WR3 was because we know that he would get him the ball. It's like every year besides this one, you look down at the Chiefs roster and you're like, oh, hey, there's Juju at WR3. He'll be okay. And you can't really say that for teams with like quarterbacks like Sam Darnold. We don't know if he's going to be good. That's why I wanted them to draft a wide receiver like Javon Baker in the Patriots or Jamari Thrash, but they just refused to do it. And I guess we will hope now for 12 more days that Sam Darnold turns into a la this year's Baker Mayfield, like a lot have said for the last 5 months.
So how much credibility do you put into the reporters who have said that like this could be Sam Darnold's year? Because you hear that every once in a while and it spits out and they're talking about, oh, Darnold actually didn't get a really good chance everywhere he went, yada, yada, yada. And like, I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit. How much do you like buy into that?
All right, Cora, I'm going to give you an answer that's twofold. The first,
Never been Kool-Aid.
my reasonable brain says I need to see it to believe it. I would understand if Darnold came from the 2021 draft and he needed, but he's from the 2018 draft. He's been in the NFL for 6 seasons. He's really that effing misunderstood for 6 years, really. That is what my, I guess, cynical and analytical soft spot says. Like, he's not just going to all of a sudden show up here and be good. However, he's never had weapons like this. He's never had a coach like this. His buddy Josh McCown is his quarterback coach. And the reason I say the answer is twofold. This is what Minnesota Vikings football is. You go find the quarterback who was once coveted, who you know has some special talent in there, and you squeeze the bitch like Jeff George, Randall Cunningham, Case Keenum, and you're like, there it is. I knew it was in there. That's since I have been a fan.
Sam Bradford.
Yeah, since 1996, this is the Viking way. Of course, it never translates to Super Bowls, but this is how history works for the Vikings. You go find a quarterback that you know has the arm talent. Bada bing, it works. He looks like a baller. And then you just hope that it's prolonged. The only problem here is we don't need this guy to be prolonged. We need him to be good this year. And then we've got our guy on ice who's going to be ready for next year. So I would say leaning into it based on the way the Vikings histrionics and Sam Darnold's talent, I think he will be quite good to the tune of 3,700 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, kind of like a Diet Kirk. The only knock on this guy ever is turnovers. It's interceptions, fumbles. That is why he is not a for sure starter in the league. He turns the ball over. Well, if you remember last year, the Vikings, one huge pain in the ass was turnovers. So we went from trying to correct the turnover problem to signing the turnover-prone quarterback. That's why I'm a little apprehensive. But I would say, even though it was a wishy-washy answer, I do believe Darnold can thrive. And, with a ceiling of the team getting to, if it's really, really good, about 11-6.
Well, Darnold next to Nick Mullins looks like the best ball protector in the world.
Well, I'm a Nick Mullins guy. I love watching that guy play. I'm going to give you this little speech. I swear to God that the moment Nick Mullins came into the Vikings lineup last year, the defense looked around each other and says, all right, bitch, we're gonna die. We're not going to play football anymore. I was there at the Bengals game with Yannick Eckhart. We were hanging out. It was like 24-7 or something, 21-7. Then fourth quarter showed up. The defense died, and it never resurrected. It was all on Nick Mullins' watch. If we would have had the ordinary Vikings defense, I think we would have been singing Mullins' praises. But it just so happened that defense decided it was done for the year, and you saw the evidence against the Lions twice, against the Packers. Yeah. I don't think that Mullins would have been as risky if you had the normative Brian Flores defense.
You wouldn't have to play hero ball.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly what I mean, and thank you for clarifying that. I love the fact that with Nick Mullins, he's not afraid to throw it downfield. I joked with Yannick Eckhart. We were at I think it was the Lions game at US Bank Stadium. I think it was 2nd and 27 or 3rd and 27. And I turned to him and said, this ain't shit for Nick Mullins. He's going to get it. And they converted the very next play. I never said that about Kirk. I would say punt it now. But with the 3rd and 27, Nick Mullins is like, let's do it, baby. This is what I was born for.
This is where I
Dustin,
shine.
I'm not gonna lie. I wanted Mullins on this team badly. When I watched him even with San Francisco, I said, boy, if they let him go, I wouldn't mind picking him up because I see a lot in him that is useful. The hero ball thing is his biggest problem.
And I don't think that's going away. I don't think you really get coached out of that too much. That's the only reservation there.
What else do we want to hit on the roster? Is there anybody else you want to talk about who maybe made this team? It's like, I don't get it. Like, I'm looking at some of the guys that made this team. Michael Juergens, Caleb Evans. Are those guys that really earn that spot to be on that 53 man? Or,
well, let's see. Caleb Evans, I agonized on that. I think on my second to last roster prediction, I had him on the outside. But then I realized, kind of out of necessity, they might want to keep him because the two cornerbacks at the top of the ticket are rather old, Shaquille Griffin and Stephon Gilmore, and I think they're going to put Byron Murphy in the slot. So Evans, yeah, I was concerned about his roster bubble status, and he was benched twice last year. I don't have a grievance with him being on the roster. Michael Juergens, they just drafted him. I don't think that, even though he looked kind of moronic at times in the preseason, they were ready to throw the towel in on him. I think overall, it surprised me how fast Fabian Moreau joined the team, and they're like, boom, you're not playing in the preseason or the second preseason game, putting you on ice. He played a little bit in the third one, but the fact that he was kind of an anonymous signing that most casual fans don't know who he is, and he just made it over Duke Shelley, hands down, no problem. That one was a little surprising. I'm continued to wonder why the Vikings employ CJ Ham, although I love him to death like you guys. They don't use him on offense, so he must be like the sweetest special teams guy you can ever imagine and locker room guy.
Maybe they're going to use the tush push.
Well, yeah, it'd be better than what they did last year.
The proper way.
Jaron Hall, I like him, but I like him as a QB3. I think this is what we were talking about earlier. Vikings fans got a little, I think, hoorah about how good he was in the preseason. To me, he always looked a little bit late, and he threw a little bit high. In that first drive against the Eagles, he was totally bailed out. There was an interception that was negated by something that had nothing to do with the play. So I think Hall is good for a QB2, QB3. I'm not mesmerized with he's going to turn into our QB1 in time. We don't need him to do that anymore. So I debated whether or not he would get a roster spot. Overall, I don't have any major issues. Like, I can't believe they did this. I will always wonder what could have been with Lewis Cine. And now we have to decide as fans, like, do we want him to go to the Titans or the Cowboys and play out of his mind? Or are we going to be selfish pricks and be like, no, we want him to flame out of the league because we don't want him to, make us all jealous?
How hilarious would it be if he went to the Cowboys?
Well, Zimmer's already stockpiling all these Vikings.
He's already gotten so many former Vikings players. And
yeah, Linval, Andrew Booth, Eric Kendricks. Zimmer was there when they signed Kendricks. Yep. Dalvin Cook has met with them today. So it's Vikings and then some of his former players. And then Cine is from Texas. He grew up 20 minutes from Cowboys Stadium. So that's a connection there. Yeah, of course I want him to do well because he deserves after the broken leg and whatever. But it'll be fascinating to see if he just couldn't catch on with the Vikings and he just needed playing time.
That's gonna be their catchphrase down in Dallas. Vikings, y'all. Is that what they're gonna call it?
Yep.
Put that on a t-shirt.
The problem is if he turns into like his draft profile from 28 months ago or so, it's going to be like Daniel Carlson, like that we bemoan and we're going to claim that we never wanted him cut in the first place, that we never gave up on. That's what fans have, this revisionist history with Daniel Carlson, where everybody wanted his ass cut after that game against the Packers in 2018. And then we bemoan him every time he makes the field goal. We're like, I can't believe the Vikings cut him.
I think it's going to be.
I'm going on record. I didn't want him cut after that game.
I remember.
I thought it's a bad game. One bad game. There are guys that were in the league for a long time that had rough games.
Our reaction to any kicker missing any kind of important field goal is we're cursed.
Yeah. Oh,
Doesn't
yeah.
matter who it is.
Well, and then that year, Johnny, Dan Bailey was like waiting for us, and at the time, he was like one of the most accurate kickers in NFL history.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think that's why Vikings fans were like, "Cut this bitch, let's go sign Dan Bailey." Dan Bailey was good for a year until he wasn't.
Dan
Thankfully,
was not a fan of that signing because that's when he was a Cowboys fan or switched.
Yeah.
I can't remember when
We
he
were
exactly
in the
switched,
process
but we were
of
in the
determining what football team I was cheering for.
So he was very familiar with Dan Bailey, and we signed him. And he goes, he just hasn't been the same after his hip injury. And I was like, he's gonna be a Viking. And Dan's like, I don't know.
he was good for a year.
He was good for a year, which is what happens with many of our kickers.
Yep.
We get a good one for a year, and then he falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the year we were like, it's got to be the coach.
Yeah.
It's got to be like, there's something wrong. Every kicker we get goes
The
to
most
shit.
accurate kicker in the NFL goes to crap. It's got to be the coach.
The thing we got to remember now, although it's probably impossible, is when Will Reichard misses one sometime this season, probably going to happen early. We can't go, oh my God, here it goes again. Like kickers miss kicks. That's what happens. Even the best ones go about 27 for 30 every year.
Right.
Now, if he starts missing game winners or extra points, that kind of stuff, then you can get in your feelings. But the first time he misses a kick, we're all going to overreact. I can feel it in my bones.
100%.
And it's the kind of a miss, too. It's like he can be off by just a hair on his follow through. Whereas there are guys who miss, and it's like, my goodness, is he even on the same field? Maybe he needs glasses because he probably just didn't see where the in between the post was. I mean, they're bad misses, and then there are guys that are just like, dang, they mishit that just slightly, or there's probably just an adjustment he needs to make. And I think we as fans have to kind of pay attention to stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
That's fair. You're asking us to be rational, and let's be honest.
That's completely out of the question.
Vikings fans are not
That's one thing I've
rational.
learned. If I really want to exhibit my Vikings fandom and show everyone in Minnesota how big a Vikings fan I am,
You just gotta be
I have to be totally irrational and emotional.
I always say the day I die, when I meet St. Peter, he's going to look down and he said, oh, you're a Vikings fan? Walk right this way. You've suffered enough, young man. Moses only had to suffer for 40 years in the desert. We're on 60 plus now.
Well, there's all those memes of like God gives your strongest soldiers the toughest battles, and there's like this decrepit person, and God's like, "You're still alive." Like whatever
it's
that
captioned
one is.
with Minnesota
Yeah.
Vikings fan.
Well, that's how I felt when McCarthy got hurt. Just that whole process, how great he looked for an hour in the preseason game. And then what was it, Monday? He missed the night practice because soreness. And then it just felt like it was heading to hell. It was like, oh, it's not really soreness, is it? Oh, it's a torn meniscus. Oh, there's two kinds of torn meniscus. I was like, whatever one is the worst is what that guy
is.
Yep.
And it was.
Yep, and he's out for the year. And he's like the only rookie quarterback in the first round that is impossible to play this year. So I felt all of those bad memes and vibes saying, like I kept telling my coworkers on our Slack channel during July and then the first preseason game, I was like, this doesn't happen to the Vikings, this quarterback being this good. What's going on here? I kept saying, like, we need to be pinched. This never happens. And then I was like, there it is. Torn meniscus out for the year. And it just felt like fruition. And that's the really thing that was shitty was like, yep. All right. We knew the other shoe was going to drop. And this was the example.
I was just waiting for them to come back and say, we've never seen anything like this before. Because that is total Vikings. Oh, we've never seen an injury like this before.
Yeah.
Man,
that would have been all. We've had enough negative talk. You guys want to do Valhalla back? Give everybody a rest for a bit? I'm going to take you back to December 9th, 2001. The Titans at the Vikings. Titans get on the board first. Eddie George, 13 yards out, 7-0. Then Joe Nenny with a 37-yard field goal. Vikes down 10-0. It's not looking good for the boys. Midway through the second, Todd Bowman to Byron Chamberlain. There's a combination that's legendary in Vikings history. A 6-yard touchdown cuts it to 10-7. And then just before halftime, Bowman hits Jake Reed. Jake with a nice juggling catch 20 yards out, 14-10 at the half. Early third, Michael Bennett, 31 yards out, carries one in, 21-10 Minnesota. 2 minutes later, Bowman scrambles, finds himself some time, hits Doug Chapman for his only NFL touchdown from 34 yards out, 28-10 Vikings. Early fourth, Steve McNair, one of the best I've ever watched, hit Derek Mason from 15 yards out. It's 28-17. With just under 8 minutes to play, Michael Bennett literally strolling in from 10 yards out, 35-17 Minnesota. Tennessee would cut the lead to 35-24 late in the game on a McNair to Wycheck touchdown. But 22 seconds later, Bowman throws just a little quick out to Randy Moss. Moss goes 73 yards from the boundary. Final score, 42-24 Minnesota. Stats on the day, Bowman, 21 for 31, 348, 4 touchdowns. He did throw a pick. Michael Bennett, 16 carries, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mr. Moss, 7 grabs, 158 yards, 1 TD, just a regular day at the office. Why is this game important to the Minnesota Vikings or in Minnesota Viking history? This was Todd Bowman's first career start, and it is the last time that a Minnesota Viking rookie quarterback in his first start has won the game. We haven't had that happen now since 2001, and they aren't going to have it happen this year either.
Yeah, there's a lot of even hardcore fans that forget that Dante Culpepper sat for his first year. Even Randy Moss forgot it. He did an interview like a month ago talking about how he wanted McCarthy to play right away. And he said, that's what we used to do in my day. And it was like, and even your quarterback didn't play right away. I remember this game. And if it's a Vikings game, I remember watching it. I remember this one, though. I was 17, still very formative. And I remember thinking, God, it doesn't matter which quarterback plays on these teams. You know, he comes in, the guy throws 4 touchdowns, and it really skewed my perception of backup quarterbacks. I thought they were all undercover ballers because I started watching the Vikings in '96, and then Warren Moon was good, and then Brad Johnson did decent. Randall Cunningham threw him in there. The rest is history. Jeff George, he was good. So every quarterback that came to the Vikings was good, and I remember thinking, even Bauman's good.
And, it's funny. You talk about Culpepper, all these good rookies that were your guys we drafted. They didn't win their first start. Like, this was Bowman's first start. And he wins in his first start. And like you said, it's like, this guy's going to be legendary in Viking history. 4 touchdowns, 348 yards on his first start. We got this covered. And that did not happen.
I don't even know if most casual fans would know him.
No, you'd have to be from that era.
No.
I actually, this is one of my favorite things I've ever done with any show I've been on. I love to look into the history of the team and see how I can tie it into kind of a wow moment or oh wow, that's kind of neat. Like, not just a regular, well, yeah, we won a game and it really didn't have any historical meaning or significance behind it. This one was fun to find though.
And if I'm not mistaken, he was like 28 or 29 at the time of that. Like, he was an old rookie.
Yeah, he was an old rook.
Yeah.
He was Chris Winkie old. Like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, now, Dustin, I don't know what you know about Dan's favorite quarterback in the NFL right now.
Is it Derek Carr?
No.
Wasn't there some story with him and Derek Carr?
Draft class.
Derek Carr and I played baseball together.
Oh, yeah. I remember the tailgate. There was some sort of Derek Carr joke or connection.
Yeah.
Dan loves this guy so much that we give a segment every week to this quarterback who is not and may never be a Minnesota Viking.
I found a tweet where I tweeted out to you asking about him before the draft with you and Luke. And I was like, hey, my husband's trying to convince me on this player. What is your opinion? And you basically laughed at me.
Who, me?
Not really, but like in a nice way. You're
like, I did? Oh, okay. All right, let's.
Danny, take it away for your segment.
This is the Knicks of time. Right? This is the part where I update everybody on the glorious career of Bo Nix.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's your guy.
That's my guy. That's my hill.
Oh,
that's my hill I'm gonna die on. No, I fell in love with this kid when he entered the draft for the 2022 for the 2023 season. So 2 years ago, he entered the draft out of Oregon, and watching all of them, like he looked young and he looked like he had a lot to improve then. And he went undrafted. Nobody picked him up. And he finished his last year out at Oregon and he improved just across the board. Right. He was only second in a lot of things behind Caleb Williams, except for completion percentage, which he was better than. And then coming through now, we've seen him play in preseason, watching him. He does have some things to improve on. I think he's trying to make plays happen too much with his feet. And I mean, he's a rookie quarterback fighting for a position between Stidham and Wilson.
And he's earned it.
He earned it. He's announced QB1. And yeah, so
this segment is going to follow the career of Bo Nix.
Yeah. If it burns into the ground, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Dan, I thought you were probably over the moon hearing that he got the QB1 job in Denver.
This is all in line with my expectations. So
he was pretty stoked. He goes, "Hey,
didn't come as a surprise."
Validation for Dan on that one.
Yeah.
All right, so some preseason stats here. Had the most dropbacks of all the quarterbacks, but most of the rookie quarterbacks, that is. Out of all the rookie quarterbacks, had the most dropbacks. What were all these numbers that I wrote down here? 80% completion percentage, 205 yards, 23 for 30, 6.8 yard average, which I felt was more of a situational thing. I felt like the coverage downfield was pretty much all 3 deep or 2 deep for most of it. And watching him is he's not lacking in arm strength. And I know a lot of people are going to argue it's like, oh, he's only averaging 6.8 yards. He's not averaging 8 like the other rookie quarterbacks. But watching this kid throw the ball downfield when he gets the chance in an open receiver, he guns it down. Anyways, 2 TDs in preseason, no interceptions, no sacks. Had the highest QBR of all the rookie quarterbacks, including Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, all of them. 116.7. Also had the most running yards, which is expected considering he tried to make too much happen with his legs. But everything with the kid looks good. Prospect of him looks good. He's got some things he needs to develop on. There were some people saying that he's leaving the pocket too soon, getting out and putting too much quarterback-induced pressures. I think his timing for first team, as far as pocket preference or pocket presence and how long he has in the pocket, is slated for first team defensive lines, for NFL defensive lines. Against second team, I think he was getting extra time and it looked like he was leaving the pockets early. And I think that's just because of that slight skill, that half a second skill difference between first team and second team. But I put him right up there with Caleb Williams. I wouldn't be surprised if the only thing holding him back is going to be his receiving core.
It's a hot take right there.
Dan, I love your love for Bo Nix. I think it's great.
I will say
I'm more on the side of like, I just didn't get, my big thing was like, is he going to be the greatest quarterback ever? No. But he was way better than what everybody was giving him credit for. And I think he's going to show that. I think he's going to show a lot of people that didn't even expect him to go in the first round that, yeah, he should have been one of the top quarterbacks.
I mean,
I think it's Oregon Ducks syndrome.
Right.
Yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
Honestly, I think it's Oregon Ducks quarterback syndrome. People look at it, every quarterback there has become a system quarterback. And when it doesn't translate great into the NFL for most of them. Marcus Mariota was okay. He never really became great. But Kellen Moore was great at Oregon, but nothing
Nick
translated.
Broke that trend of he wasn't a rushing quarterback.
Yeah, he's a drop back.
He's a drop back who can scramble,
Yeah.
but he's not a running quarterback.
No.
You got a hot take, Dustin? Got some.
Well, yeah, I if I'd laughed during the
Well,
draft,
you
well, I
didn't
should-
laugh. I think
Yeah.
it was you said someone would stop being a Vikings fan.
Oh, Thor Nice.
Thor would stop being a Vikings fan if
Yeah.
we picked Bo
So
Nix.
I had 2 points of contention with Nix as the Vikings quarterback possibility. So when you watch the tape at Oregon or you read the scouting reports, he did have a tendency to throw underneath or throw shorter distances than the other guys, like Drake May is who I ultimately wanted. So if the Vikings had one chance for the first time since Bridgewater 10 years ago to draft a quarterback, which we knew they were all going to do, I didn't want them to get the rink-a-dink guy. I didn't want them to get the guy who can figure out passing the ball around the field later in his career. He's got the intangibles. I wanted the opposite. I wanted the best pure thrower to me, which is Drake May. And then if he needs to be coached on pocket mobility and all that, then great, let's do that. So I didn't want the Vikings to half-ass it with the guy who couldn't really throw like Caleb Williams or Drake May. And then lastly, piggybacking on what I evidently said on Twitter was, on Vikes Now from about mid-February until draft night, I must have had between 30 and 40 draft heads, like National Vikings draft heads, Paul Allen, those guys. And almost every single one of them said, keep Bo Nix the hell away from my football team. And so when so many smart guys say that, like, I don't want to just go against the grain and then be like, well, everybody told me this guy wasn't going to be the real deal. So that's why I shied away from him. However, we all know that Sean Payton's offense is different than most. Like, Drew Brees didn't make a career out of go routes and just launching the bastard deep. He did the underneaths and the slants that we joked about a little while ago. So if Bo Nix is going to succeed, it's going to be with Sean Payton. So they're married to each other. They're a good fit. So yeah, I hope that doesn't denigrate your Bo Nix take.
No. I still love the guy. No, so like my big thing on him and why I thought he would have been a good fit is because he is able to scramble and make plays happen. It was the opposite of what Cousins was. Cousins can't make it happen, but he could throw it far. He could throw it accurately, but Nix needed to develop that. I think he's got the arm. I think his big thing is timing and accuracy, leading his runners, placing it over the shoulder on fades a little better. But so like those things down the field, I felt everybody can always improve on those, and he's one that could probably improve a little more. But it was the fact that it was the opposite of Cousins, and he could scramble. He gets out of the pocket. He can make a play. He can make an accurate 15-yard throw running left or right. And that's what my attraction for him towards the Vikings is with Jefferson down the field, you can take a risk and throw it 30, 40 yards down the field. But a lot of the underneath stuff, I think, would help the Vikings a lot to help move it down the field. That's my take on him and why I thought he would have been a good fit.
It sure looks great right now. That's
yeah.
Well,
right. Yeah. Now when we got to see what happens. I always say that the first 4 games are pretty much an extension of preseason for me. Guys are still trying to figure it out and working it out, but now they're doing it against the first team for 4 quarters. That's when I think we really get to see if guys, how they're developing, how they're going to contribute. We're talking about the younger guys or guys that are new to starting lineups. I'm not talking about the vets who we pretty much know what we're getting every time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Bo Nix. But Dan, I know you're excited because he's the starter now.
Oh yeah.
We watched the only preseason games we watched were the Vikings and Denver.
The Broncos.
And even with the Broncos, I just watched when Bo Nix
came on, we watched and then turned it right off.
All right, watching by then too. So,
Corey, are you ready to get defensive?
Yes, I am. Speaking of defensive, I think we could very segue right into our B-Flow, Brian Flores drama that's gone on. Personally, like my opinion on all of that is, number one, I think it's like a different type of coach. I think Tua may have embellished, and maybe like that's how he felt when B-Flow was saying, you know, like he's the worst player ever or whatever. I think it's probably just how he felt. And, you know, constant critique of everything. And he probably said some things that he, you know, in the heat of the moment because it wasn't that great. But I don't think it's as bad as he made it out to be. Like, I don't think that Brian Flores is calling Tua an awful person and you suck and you shouldn't be a quarterback. But I think enough critique all the time as a rookie, it can get in your head. So I do love the fact that we had his bodyguards behind him, just there for, you know, support. I think I think what he said was, you know, perfect. You know, he was like, basically, I'm learning from it. I'm pretty sure he was like, if that's how he took it, I'm learning how to talk better or something like that. So it was just kind of, you know, a little word salad that put together really well. So we didn't get an answer that he did it, but he also is learning. I don't know. I don't think it's as big a deal as like apparently the national media and Miami media keep asking him about. But we'll see what happens as the year goes on.
Well, Tua to me is like a performance vehicle. Anytime it drops below 50 degrees, it just shuts down and doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And me saying that, there's proof to it. I mean, it's not just me saying it. His numbers in the cold are mediocre at best.
It was surprising for him to say that because when we interviewed him and hired him, there were so many people who said he has the support of players. Like when they fired him from Miami, there were a ton of the defense. Maybe it's just the defensive players, but I kept reading and it kept coming out that like, he's got the players. It's a huge surprise. Maybe it shouldn't have been that much a surprise how he was treating Tua, but it just kind of surprised me that it came out now that he was a jerk to him. Also with all of those pieces on how much players love him. So that was my little drama of the defense. And I'm defending B-Flow, which is a little conflicting.
I just think some guys are destined to be great coordinators and not head coaches.
I think we've had two of them on our team, and one of them was a head coach, and one of them is a defensive coordinator.
Yep.
I think it makes an amazing defensive coordinator, but as a head coach, maybe it's just a defensive coordinator thing. I don't know, they don't have the softness for quarterback.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Like,
is that the right word?
Who was a DC who's been a really good head coach that I can't think off the top of my head.
Who what?
Who was a great DC who became a great head coach?
Belichick.
He's probably like the one that I can think of.
No, there's Tom.
Who's the Niners coach?
Parcells.
No, he's a offensive coach.
DeMeco Ryan seems like he's turning into a
DeMeco Ryans could be one. Yeah.
Was Mike Tomlin?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin.
My take on Brian Flores, you're going to have to follow me with this analogy for a second. About 10, 11 years ago when I was single, I started dating this girl, this woman that was from right around here. And we were semi-serious. And throughout those weeks and months, she would tell me about how bad the father of her kids was, how this guy was miserable, rotten, ruined her life. And I was like, God, this guy must be awful. And then I finally met him a couple times. I was like, this guy's fantastic. I was like, what on earth have you been telling me is what I kept thinking. Obviously, she and I didn't work out. And I still see this. He works at the public school system. And I still see the guy to this day and think he's one of the neatest guys I've ever met. That's what I think is going on with Flores here is like this particular relationship. Something went bad. And then Tua's coming out. I don't know why he would just say this.
I don't either.
I just don't get it. And so I knew that this probably wasn't a legitimate critique of Brian Flores based on how Brian Flores replied. If he was an asshole, he would have come out defiant and say, you know what, I don't know why that little prick, keep your name out my mouth.
Yeah.
And he you could see that he felt bad. Like, oh man, I hurt his feelings? Man, I wish I could have that one back. And so when you have some guy who didn't have that and bravado, and Brian Flores is like hard as nails. He could have came out and said, bitch, stop talking about me. But he didn't. He said, this hurt me. I need to, going forward, analyze how I treat people. So I highly doubt that Flores was this huge scourge of the Miami Dolphins. And let's face it, behind the scenes, the Dolphins brass was calling about Tom Brady and trying to get Deshaun Watson. So it wasn't like a Flores only thing about not wanting Tua. I think there's probably truth to both sides, but with Flores, he wouldn't have made it all the way here to the Vikings and then have guys like Andrew Van Ginkel electively join, or Stephon Gilmore, who was his teammate in New England. I don't think that Brian Flores is public enemy number one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it probably was how you kind of just like talk to people. And if you don't know the person and how they motivate people, I think, like you said, they just weren't the right combo. Because, a lot of defensive coordinators are like, no, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And a lot of critiquing. And some people could take critiquing as, oh my gosh, they think I suck. Rather than like, oh, do this to get better and you're already good. So I'm just a little bitter that he had to say that.
It's the difference between smear and spread. I don't know why this popped in my head, but it's like, okay, you're gonna make a PB&J sandwich, right? Do you spread the peanut butter on, or do you smear it on?
There you go. There you go. That was actually a pretty good analogy.
Dan goes peanut butter on us.
But some people are gonna be like, why does it matter? And others are gonna be like, it's definitely spread. Yeah.
I think we'll forego the Nostradamus question because we've run long.
I was going to have one last thing, and super excited about Gilmore. I wanted him way back in the day when it was like not feasible for us to have him. The first time he came out of the Patriots. And I don't think he's going to come in and be like, oh, this amazing cornerback of past and have this amazing career. I think there's still some left in him. I think he's still going to do great. The main thing is the leadership part. He's going to come in. He's going to be a leader for the group of guys that are relatively young or haven't had a true leader in their cornerback room. And I think that's going to be really important.
He's Patrick Peterson is what he is.
Yeah. But better.
He was also really good last year. He played like 1,064 defensive snaps for the Cowboys. So he wasn't like this old cornerback who came in on third downs. He was really good. He had like a 70-something PFF. He played all the time. And so I don't want fans to think that this is a patchwork solution. Like, hey, he had 5 Pro Bowls back in the day, and he's coming here for one last hurrah. He's actually pretty good. It's almost like, let's say we still need the WR3, and we traded for DeAndre Hopkins. That's kind of how I feel about this. Like, it's not just some guy who's going to finish his career right off from the sunset. Like, he's pretty good, and it's really weird that he chose the Vikings, who probably aren't going to contend for a Super Bowl.
I know.
He must like work. Brian Flores can draw guys in.
He's a terrible person, though, man.
Yeah, he's the worst. But maybe Gilmore likes the bad boys. I don't know. Maybe that's what he wants. No, I think it was a great pickup. I'm happy to give him.
I didn't believe it when I saw it. I had to check the source, and I had to go to multiple different sources because there's too many troll accounts, and I get my hopes up too much, and I was so excited.
Yeah, and his contract is up to $10 million, right? I think it's with incentives it can get to $10 million. Is that what it is?
Is it up to 10 or 11?
I think it's up to 10. It'll be pretty. Where's Aaron Jones? Aaron Jones is up to 7, and I think Gilmore's is up to 10. It'll be tricky for him to get all those, but I think it's really cool that we have him because now we can breathe a sigh of relief about the cornerback room. We had Kyrie Jackson die, Mekhi Blackman tear his ACL, and we're like, really? Like, when's this going to stop, folks? And then they didn't do anything, and then we're like, oh, okay, so Jack Griffin it is, and it was cool that they hedged the bet and got Gilmore, who is quite good.
This was probably one of my favorite signings this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually all in on the Aaron Jones revenge tour. I want T-shirts with his stats for each game when the season's over.
There's always one Packer turncoat every season that comes over.
There was a little kid at training camp that Victor Viking gave him he showed up in a Green Bay 33 jersey, and Victor gave him a Vikings 33 jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a setup or not, but it was still pretty cute.
It's so cool.
Regardless.
I think it's time to wrap it up. We've taken up an hour of Dustin's time, and I am so grateful that you took this time with us tonight. A lot of fun talking with you. Love your insight. We definitely want to get a name for those postseason Vikings Twitter awards. The Scolies is my suggestion, but I love those. I have actually been a 2-time nominee, and I won one.
It's hard to believe that those things have been going on for 5 years now. Like, I remember when I started them thinking, would anybody care about this? And I think they still do.
People cared enough to buy votes.
Yep.
They did, yeah. We got rid of that award. Last year was the first time we've ever done it with no controversy. Last year, we had nobody bitching to me, nobody trying to angle behind the scenes if they could win. I always had politicking. And last year, we had 0, and I was very, very proud. It's weird how Vikings Twitter turns over its own roster. Like, when I go back and look at the awards from 4 years ago, I'm like, whatever happened to that guy? They're just not around anymore.
I think they're a lot of fun. I love when they come out. I know I don't care if I win. I don't care if I get nominated. I love to nominate and I love to vote. But I just love the different categories you come up with every
Yeah. That's weird.
There's always a new category or two that you throw in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is right about now is when I start thinking about what they could be, and then we get down to brass tacks around the holidays.
But it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend, if you're on Vikings Twitter, give Dustin a follow. Look for the awards at the end of the year. They're a lot of fun to vote on. If you're good, you get nominated, and that's always fun too. The nomination in this one, it's not like the Grand. It really is nice to be nominated because that means somebody on Vikings Twitter pays attention to what you're talking about.
Unless it's what's the most, is it annoying or?
Yeah, when I was kind of more of a firebrand 5 years ago, we had some pretty ruthless one, like the thirstiest account. We had the worst account, and then over the years, I've realized, do I really want to hurt people's feelings? So I try to get rid of some of the ones that are controversial or downright rude. I think like I said last year, it was a pretty level playing field.
It's a lot of fun. Again, thank you so much for your time tonight. We would love to have you back again.
Yeah, let's chat in a month or so, okay?
Yeah.
We would love it. We would love it. We would like to see you be a regular visitor to the show. Anybody have anything to close with? We got the regular season starting up in a week, so buckle your chin straps.
Skol, baby.
Skol, and good night, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.
Are we gonna